So of all the things we've talked about, Merle, what would you like the listeners to hang on to the most?
That regular people have absolutely power to make a difference. It's great to get, take things like mental health first aid or safe talk or peer training or, additional training, or to be a therapist or to be a counselor or to run a call line. All of those are absolutely critical and much needed. But the most important thing that you already have, is your ability to listen without judgment, to create space for someone, whether it's yourself or someone in your family or a neighbor, a friend who's struggling. Be with them. Don't pull away and listen.
Wow. 80% of really good communication apparently is listening.
We also know that a high number of suicides have alcohol in their blood because it's a depressant that will actually, make this idea more acceptable in your mind and more palatable. It's another one of those things that, again, we don't talk about it and we need to.
Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm.
Hi there, folks. Welcome to episode 66, if you can believe it, of the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Farm Family Coach Elaine Fraze, and I am delighted today to have as my guest Dr. Merle Massie, who is the Executive Director of the Do More Ag Foundation. And Merle and I have been watching each other's work for a long time, but we're also cheerleading each other on because we're also actual farm partners. And so we're walking the talk, just like many of you who are listening to this podcast. So I have been a supporter of Do More Ag probably since it started 8 years ago. And I to get ready for the podcast today, Merle, was just cruising around your website. So what are you most excited about right now that you're doing at Do More Ag? Because the website's really good.
Well, I really appreciate that. And of course, every website is always due for, make sure it's got good maintenance and upgrade and that everything's there. We have so much going on at Do More Ag. But, I came on board about 14 months ago as the executive director. And the thing that I love the most about Do More Ag is our mission. And that's really simple: to cultivate a culture of well-being with Canadian farming communities. And when I break that down, the words that really sit on my heart is culture and community.
Yeah.
Those are the two pieces. And that's what gets me up every morning.
Yeah, and culture is, when I speak about culture in ag, I say culture is the glue that holds the family and the farm together. And for me, it's how we believe, what we believe to be true, the stories we're telling ourselves, how we behave with each other, and how we make decisions. So I have this little sticker from you. It's called Talk Tough No, Talk It Out rather than Tough It Out. So we have this culture in agriculture. Well, just, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, or sorry, you're tired. Just buckle up, Charlie. Let's cowboy on, or whatever the expressions are. They're all very damaging and hurtful. So Merle, you also have a podcast, which I want people to know about. And I think the title is great. So tell us about the podcast.
Yeah. It's a new initiative that we just launched last year in 2025. It's called Hey, Are We Okay? What I did, Elaine, is that I took a look at what podcasts are out there for mental health, right? And so there's sort of two major streams of podcasts when it comes to mental health. The first stream is where a podcast host will interview people who are psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists and, yoga practitioners. And, they're experts in their field, and they have, and they bring skill set and insight, to the world of mental health. And it gives the person who's listening maybe something new to try. And those are fabulous podcasts. And the second sort of stream of podcasts that you see are when you interview people who have lived experience, who have a particular mental illness, a real story to share. And those are also absolutely fabulous podcasts. But I took a look at those two streams, and I thought, we don't need more in those streams. Not really, although it's always good to hear from farmers who have lived experience and from people who understand the realities of agriculture and have, maybe adjusted what they do in terms of clinical work to account for that. But there really isn't anything in what I call the third stream. And that is what communities can do to help when it comes to mental health and mental illness, because I know we both live, rural all the time. I live in a small rural community in West Central Saskatchewan, and I know that we're really good at stepping up to the plate when somebody has something happen physically. They've been in a car accident, there's been a heart attack, there's been a stroke, there's been a cancer diagnosis, whatever it is. We don't, in rural communities, necessarily know what to do or how to help when someone has a mental health diagnosis or an illness and they're in the hospital. And what we actually do is that we do something that contributes to the problem. We don't mean to, but we do it. We step away. We say, they need space, and we step away.
Or I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so a lot of the work that we do at Do More Ag is geared for and aimed at regular people in regular rural communities and across farms and across agriculture across Canada, to give each of us an idea of what we can do, what we are able to do, lean into the skills and strengths that we already have to continue to reach out and help and support one another, just like we do in every other kind of crisis.
And I think that's why I had so much fun cruising your website this morning, Merle, because I read the entire transcript for the interview that you did with the two filmmakers of Deep Rooted and or Deep Roots, and the film that is being shown across Canada. And I hope I'm going to make that part of my to-do list to get to come to Boissevain, which is our little town.
That would be fantastic. We are going to screen it online 3 times coming up later on in March. So watch for that.
Yeah. And by the time this airs, that will have gone by, but people can still go to the website and see where it could be possibly
absolutely
invited to stream somewhere else in their local community. But what you're talking about, I had a severe postpartum depression in 1984 when I gave birth to Erica, our daughter. And I was basically out of commission for 9 months and spent most of it in a psych ward. And I say this publicly because one of the things that I'm called to do in my speaking, Merle, as well, is destigmatize the shame or the blame or the isolation around mental illness and work towards mental wellness and community. And so as I was going through your Hey, Are You Okay podcast listings, I was just really encouraged to see, the people in Ontario who've built the cabin retreat for people who are first responders and farmers who need a retreat place to go to. And in that family, there was a death by suicide.
Yes.
And then you also have Hey, Are You Okay about men's sheds, which is, I think, a concept that originated in Australia, because I've heard about them for a long time. But it's that power of connection. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you and also where our listeners is I have an open box of Talk, Ask, Listen. And the reason it's open, this resource comes from you. I think it cost me about $50. I think I bought 3 boxes. But what I do with these cards is I put them on tables when I'm speaking. And it just says, do I remind you of anyone? What assumptions would you make about me after looking at my social media?
I like that one.
Do you think I like surprises? Why or why not? But these are all conversation starters. And I also noticed that you have Talk, Ask, Listen workshops. I think there's one today as we're taping this in Barrhead, Alberta.
There is.
So shout out to all our friends in Barrhead. But I think people need to understand, Merle, the richness of the resources that Do More Ag over these last 8 years has been able to collaborate on. And again, just going to Do More Ag, domore.ag. I'm going to speak this out. domore.ag/crisis-contacts.
Yeah.
Because I get calls all the time from people who are not doing well.
Yep.
And I want to say, well, if you're in this province, this is where you go. And you've put it all on one page. So I guess the first action item of today's podcast with you is people go to the domore.ag website and just start taking in all of those amazing resources. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with you, Merle, is what you're seeing. You've just won an award, and congratulations on that, as the 2025 recipient of the Jordan James Pickle Mental Health Achievement Recognition Award, which
We
is a
got
really long name
It
for
is a
doing good
really
work.
long award, and we actually won 2 awards last
Oh,
year.
okay, good.
Yeah, we won the Community Champions Award, 2025 Community Champions Award from CAMI. So that's the Canadian Association for Mental Illness and Mental Health. It's a national association, an umbrella association of a whole bunch of different mental
Good.
health practitioners. And so, yeah, that was 2 major awards that Do More won. And, the biggest story from that, Elaine, is that people who live in urban communities, one of the pieces that they don't necessarily recognize is that agriculture has its own culture to the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to the point where that's why Do More Ag exists, because we know that culture, we live that culture, we are farmers, we were founded by farmers. We know that when it comes to talking about mental health and mental illness in rural communities, you need a slightly different tack, and you need to make sure people who are reaching out in those rural communities, they need to know that the therapist that they're going to talk to understands agriculture. It's huge.
And that would be a shout out to Lauren Van Uyck and the National Farmers Mental Health Alliance, because that's also part of their mission. And Lauren's been on this podcast, and
we work closely with them,
ones.
and
Yes.
we love Loren, and we actually Do More Ag, and Loren. Hopefully, yes, by the time this podcast airs, we will be able to announce it. We've signed an MOU just to work closely together to support one another.
Good. So for us to be practical today, Merle, farmers, as you say, the culture of agriculture is its own special agriculture, which is why we want to have ag-informed therapists. But there's also a resource, I think it might have initiated first at FCC, but it's on your resource page, and it's called How Are You Feeling? Looking at your internal dashboard. And I'd like you to give us an idea of what farmers need to be paying attention to in April. When this airs, I remember I was coaching a farmer once who said, chop, chop, all the machinery has to be ready by April 20th. And the kids are sitting at the table, shocked. And they said, Dad, what's the importance of April 20th? He said, that's the number I picked. That's the date I picked, that everything has to be ready to go. And those of us listening, know that I'm even seeing the stress now with employment on our farm changing. We have an employee who's leaving at the end of March, so the workforce is going to be a little bit less. And I look at my husband and I say, and I like what Leslie Kelly has encouraged people to say on her farm. Some of the language she's using is, what's on your mind? And what's heavy right now? So, Merle, what's heavy right now in agriculture in terms of mental health and wellness?
There's a couple of things, of course, going on in that March, April space that, yes, there's a lot of us who are grain farmers. We're gearing up for the seeding year. We're maybe making sure that the equipment's ready. We're watching the snow melt. We're watching for drought. We're watching for flood. We're taking a look at what's happening. There's so much pre-work. And of course, there's a lot of costs involved in that, right? The cost of the seed and the fertilizer. Finances are one of the biggest things that tends to weigh on a farmer's heart. I don't want to forget, though, that March and April tend to be high calving season as well. For anyone who's a mixed farmer or a cattle rancher, there are a lot of calves dropping. There's a lot of calls to the vet. There's a lot of late nights. There's a lot of early mornings.
Exhaustion.
There's a lot of loss, right? There's a lot of risk when you've got cattle, and our farm has cattle. And so, this is one of the things that we pay attention to as well and think about. So I just want to recognize that there's a lot happening on the farm, and just depending on your farm, and maybe you're a broadacre grain farm, but maybe you're a greenhouse. Maybe you've got some of that kind of thing, and you've already got plants in the greenhouse, but you're thinking about disease, and you're thinking about when are things going to warm up. Maybe we've got a cold stretch.
Is it going to be an early fall? Is it an early spring or late spring?
Exactly. All of these things that sit on our mind. I also know that what you just raised, Elaine, is so important as well, because the workload matters, right? And so that knowing who's there at the farm to handle the work, to support the work, and to make sure that we have employees or family members that we can trust and lean on, it's a big thing. And you add in some of the things that we don't talk about. So when I talk about stresses on the farm, I tend to break it into 3 areas. And
Okay.
there's the socially acceptable ones, which is weather, crops, prices, tariffs,
How much rain did you
employment,
get last
labor.
night,
Yeah,
Merle?
right. That's the socially acceptable stuff. And then there's the second level, which is the everyday pressures, right? So that seasonality. We've got certain seasons where we've got a lot done that we need to do a lot. We've got isolation. We've got dynamics of what's happening across the farm. Maybe you're trying to grow the farm. Maybe you're trying to make some other changes. And then there's the third level that we don't talk about near as much, but this is where your expertise comes in. And that's things like farm transition, farm dynamics. Are we talking about things, really, really hard things like domestic abuse or drinking alcohol,
Addiction.
drugs, addiction, right? Like these sorts of things that we don't talk about, but we know are higher in rural areas. And so those sorts of family dynamics make a difference. Maybe there's a divorce going on somewhere across the family. And what impacts is that going to have, across the farm? Maybe there's a farm transition and it isn't going well, right? How does that impact the crop year? There's always so much going on.
And I think, one of the things I have said many times is you do not have because you do not ask. And asking for help or asking for support or asking the other people on your farm. We've been really helped in our practice, Merle, with Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's book, Nonviolent Communication. And the framework is, here's what you're observing. So you're observing a lot of tension and frustration around the farm transition, not meeting the timelines that each generation expects it should be meeting. And then people aren't asking for or telling other people what they need. And in 2025, I think that's one of the most powerful questions that I've been using a lot with my own family and friends and the people we're coaching. What do you need in April? What do you need right now? I need everyone to understand that planting is job one and all hands on deck. And I need people to understand that we attack the issue, not the person, right? In terms of conflict resolution and good and positive conflict behavior. And then you also said, the everyday changes that are underlying is keeping everybody in the loop, because the T-shirt I want Do More Egg to print is love does not read minds.
Yes.
And I think I'm gonna buy your $88 hoodie because it looks like a really good one. So folks, you can also go to Merle's shop on the website as well. That's how they create some income to do all the things they want to do. So why is this so hard? So I have my Beanie Baby bowl here, the bowl in the
Nice.
middle of the room. So in terms of mental wellness, Merle, why do people still say they're having a nervous breakdown? I hate that word.
Yeah, it's a tough
I
one.
say they're struggling with depression or anxiety. And at this season, many farmers listening to this are struggling with overwhelm. Overwhelm. And I just want to encourage everyone listening to this, your body is not a machine. And yes, you're getting the tractors ready, the planters ready, the drills, you're getting all the calving barns ready, you're doing all the things. But what are you doing for yourself? And I just want to shout out, my listeners probably haven't heard this yet. I don't know if I've announced it to the world, but I now have a sleep apnea machine and I feel 10 years younger. And wouldn't you know, my apnea was extreme. And nobody picked this up because nobody asked me, Elaine, how are you feeling? I said, and I could have said, I really would like to get rid of my brain fog. And for all the postmenopausal women listening to this podcast,
Like
I'm
me.
also going to shout out, yes, would you please talk to your doctors about how you're feeling, and don't let them say, oh, it's just because you're a woman or you're at that age, and don't accept ageism, because I really like in the chart here that I printed off about how are you feeling, being well rested or getting as good a sleep as you can get is super important, right? It might even be going and getting yourself a decent new pillow because you've been sleeping on that old ratty flat one for way too long, right? And then it
Absolutely.
says good diet. And I have my sister-in-law who lives in the city, and she says, Elaine, I'm coming out in April and I'm going to help you do some freezer meals. And I was just in shock because urban people might not understand that women, especially on farms, carry many roles, and the traditional one would also be to keep people well fed, which is a thing when you're feeding 5 or 6 guys who are putting the crop in, or the guy who's just done night checks and is exhausted because he had calving issues during the night, right?
Yeah, all of those things. One of the
Right.
things you mentioned, so that tool, one of the things that we did is that we actually took that tool and we put it in a series of 10 questions. And it's a
Okay.
separate website to Do More Egg. It's our self-check-in tool, and we kept it separate because we didn't want it lost within the larger,
Okay.
many resources of Do More Egg, but we've cross-posted the resources. It is called Hey, Are You Okay? So it's very similar
Okay.
to Hey, Are We Okay? Our podcast. And we did that deliberately because we want people to ask those questions and to reach out and ask to one
Yeah.
another. But Hey, Are You Okay? That self-check-in tool, it actually won one of the producer mental well-being competitions
Oh,
last
good.
year with the federal government, and we're working on redeveloping and relaunching it this year. One of the things that it does is that it asks about your diet, it asks about your sleep, it's simple 10 questions that asks you about how you're doing
Basics.
today, and it is
Yeah.
the basics, and it reminds you about those basics because they do matter. They matter a lot. Speaking of basics, look at you.
I know, my sinus
Make sure you've got
infection.
tissues in
Yeah,
every
I have
tractor.
tissues. So,
And
don't know
not
what
just for
happened.
wiping the oil plug either, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. Make sure, and toilet paper rolls of toilet paper are also very handy to have.
Yeah, otherwise your dad
Uh,
comes in with half a sock, and we don't want to answer that question.
yeah, that's right. Too much information. If you're physically well too, it's the alcohol thing, where you mentioned briefly about addiction. And I want people to understand that alcohol, drug addiction, those kinds of things um, has had a lot of affirmation in agricultural, unfortunately. Like when I go to an event and people are needing to have more than one drink or whatever, or there's an open bar, and I definitely do not want to be the after dinner speaker when there's been an open bar. It really, really bothers me that people are self-medicating to think that that's going to numb or take away the core issue of whatever the key stressors are that they're not managing well.
And that is often, how these, whether it's a little bit of drink, whether it's, beer at the shop at 9 a.m, these sorts of things that we know happens. And that is that self-medication piece. But Elaine, what worries me even more than that is that alcohol is one of the things that is highly connected to suicide. And suicide,
Yes.
about 50% of suicides, it takes 10 minutes from thought to completion, right? That's a very tiny window. But we also know that a high number of suicides have alcohol in their blood because it's a depressant that will actually, make this idea more acceptable in your mind
Palatable.
and more
Yeah.
palatable. And so it's another one of those things that, again, we don't talk about it, and we need to.
Right. And again, that's where you also do not want to be isolated, and you
No.
want to reach out for support and know what the local resources are for that to happen. Um, I'm just going down the list here in terms of being healthy and optimal, but having clear and focused mental wellness, being able to solve problems and find solutions. And creating solutions is also a positive conflict behavior, Merle, and what we deal with our conflict dynamic profile. And so I want people to think about it's okay. Hey, how are you doing? And hey is spelled Hay, just so you know, so you can find
Little
it.
play on words.
It's a little play on words, which I think is great. So, hey, are you okay? It's 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 also giving people, especially in your inner circle of the nuclear family, that sharing your emotions is a really good thing. And somebody in my family said recently, I'm not having fun. And I really listened and I
That's a
said,
big flag.
tell me more. What's not fun at the moment?
That statement you
Where's
just
the
said, tell me
disconnect,
more,
right?
that is the most powerful thing that you can say, because people will say, they'll go too far and they'll say, what can I do? Or what do you want me to do? And I always said, whoa, 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 back up, back up, back up. All you're doing in this moment is creating space for
Listening.
them to talk. That is
Yeah.
the gift, is listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, particularly, even as you mentioned that the box of you mentioned the social acceptable things like how much rain, or talking about the
Yep.
weather, right? And then the next level is the everyday changes happening on the farm. But the whole thing in the work we do in farm transition, and who gets the farm and when, and how can you step back without stepping away, those I think are key challenges now too, Merle, because we have so many aging
We
farmers
do.
who are feeling disrespected and say, well, and this is a horrible thought, but this is the thought, things would just be so much better if I wasn't here. No,
I
not
know
true.
it is not true, and it is very scary because the highest number of suicides is in that 45 plus age category, right? Like there's a high number of men, and when it comes to rural spaces, of course, we need to talk about firearms. That's a
Yeah.
reality, and we have way more risk in rural areas because of our accessibility to firearms, and 97%. Like, so here's a stat for you. We think about firearms in terms of, homicides, killing someone else, but
Yeah.
75% of the gun deaths in Canada are suicides.
Yes,
And,
and that's how they're being used for
yeah,
self-harm.
yeah, it's a self-harm tool
Yeah, I just
primarily.
I get goosebumps when you're talking this, Merle,
Sorry.
because Lydia Carpenter, who's on our coaching team, she has done the suicide assist
Yeah.
training in the next town over, and I've done the mental health first aid course, and our coaching team, we've encouraged everybody to do those things. And I think it's just important for people listening to this that if you truly care about the well-being of your family, your farm, and your community, that you will be you'll be a very good observer of who's not showing up, right? Of who's isolating themselves, and who's maybe taking beer with them into the tractor at 9 o'clock in the morning. And like, seriously, I've had those phone calls from women who said, Elaine, they're all drunk out there and they're all combining. I said, this is not a good thing. And to them, that was part of the culture of being able to cope with the stress of harvest, which is not a good coping mechanism. The
There are
the
lots
other
of
thing
positive things. If I can just jump in for a second,
yeah, let's do that.
I do want to recognize that living rural can also be very awesome, right? We can
Yes.
do stuff on our farm that we just if we decide that we're going to, scrape off the dugout and go skating, off we go. If we want to go downhill skiing in the coulee, if there's enough snow,
Yeah.
off we go. You want to make cross country ski trails, off we go. I'm thinking about this through winter lens
Right. And
because
the nice,
when
beautiful,
we're
fluffy
recording,
snow
yeah,
we
that's
have
right.
at the
That's
moment.
right. But there's lots of summer things too, right? I've got friends who they had a huge flood problem. Well, they got themselves kayaks and off they went, right? Kayaking
We
around their farm. I've got neighbors who built a cabin literally 200 yards from their house. But when they go to the cabin, they leave the farm behind and they do cabin things. And these are examples of all the really great fun things that we also do and really enjoy on our farms. And one of the things that we did in that Hey Are We Okay podcast is that we've created a space within the podcast for people to share with us their stories of fun things that they do on the farm. That's
Oh,
just for them,
great.
for like no
Yeah.
good reason at all, just because, right? And I've had stories come in of people who write little newsletters about their farm. Another farm that said, I put a 4-hole golf course on my farm. I'm like, what? You did what? Like, right?
That's cool.
Various stories. Like there's all kinds
Yeah.
of stories out there and I want to hear them. And
You
so,
want to hear the
if
fun.
it absolutely. So if people want to reach out to us at feedback@domore.ag and tell us your story. Even better yet, whip out your phone, open your voice app and tell it who you are, where you farm, what kind of farm you have, and what you do on your farm for fun, and email that little voice note to me. That's fantastic, and we'll put it in one of our podcast episodes.
Well, I hope there's 400 people listening to this and send you 400 new ideas of what they do for fun. And part of that in our circle of reference here would be bonfires.
Oh, yeah.
Celebrating with a really good bonfire. And the kayaking one I'm laughing about, sort of, but not really, because Whitewater Lake is a 15,000 acre slough that's 4 miles to the west of my farm, but it was encroaching on our farm one year in a flood situation, and we literally went kayaking between the fence posts, and that's really weird when you're in a kayak going over a fence line.
Yes.
So those things can happen too. But I think that's also part of the emotional well-being and the overwhelm is, it's also fun to eat cake.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's somebody's birthday, make the cake, whatever, buy the cake, stick money. My mom used to wrap wax paper in over quarters and nickels and dimes, and that went in the strawberry filling between the 2-layer chocolate cake. And people say, Elaine, what year were you born? I said, 1956. So back in the 50s and 60s.
I still do that, just so you know.
Oh, good.
My family would think it's the weirdest birthday if they got a cake that didn't have money in it.
Well,
and
there
usually
you
some
go.
international
Merle,
money too.
You're my kindred spirit because, because I have someone in my family says, wow, you have a lot of pictures of people with birthday cakes. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter what day your birthday is, but you need a cake. You need somebody to recognize that you're special, you're unique, and you're to be celebrated. And I don't know, Merle, if you've ever met Dr. Nikki Gerard. I don't even know if she's still living, but she was a psychologist from Saskatoon who did
I've read
study.
a whole bunch of her work. She did
of her
fantastic work. I love it.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger was one of her research studies that she did for 12 years, I think, to recognize what makes farm families resilient.
Yeah.
And when I wrote my first book way back in 2006, I used her research to organize how the book was put together. And the first thing is that strong families celebrate.
Yeah.
Right? And so this emotional well-being and having a good social network. And I know having birthday parties where you don't have to do all the catering. You just say, it's potluck. Everybody brings something, but we're going to have a birthday. Another part of being resilient was connection to community. And that's what we're talking in this circle about, not letting people in your community get isolated and checking in on them. And then the third thing was really, really good communication. So I think you've done a great job. So the other thing I want to just read off your dashboard here on how are you feeling is finding self-care activities that give you a serotonin boost. So that would be things that are fun.
Absolutely.
What other things have you heard, or what other kinds of self-care things do you do?
Well, I have a brother-in-law who's gotten into chainsaw carving. My sister-in-law carves spoons. I created a labyrinth. So I have a whole bunch of rock piles. We farm in a lot of hills. And so every spring we pull an awful lot of rocks off the fields, and they're just sitting there in rock piles on the edges of the field and along the fence lines. And I had a piece of land on our farm that our larger machinery could no longer get in, right? So we couldn't seed it anymore. And it was, just grown up with grass. And so we weren't using it for anything. And I said to my husband, I'm going to build myself a labyrinth. And he looked at me. He's like,
amazing.
Off you go. And so it's 14 meters wide. I use the rock piles off of our own farm. It takes about 3 minutes to walk. When I need a lot of time by myself, and it gives me a particular quiet space. My family will watch me drive out to the farm and just go walk my labyrinth. It's so much, and I finished it in 2024. I don't know how many times I've walked it. We opened up our farm last year to our neighbors to come and see, various things that I've built. That's just one example. There are others, and they were just bowled over, but because why wouldn't you?
So
I've got all the resources.
You need to put some pictures up somewhere so people can see what this labyrinth
it's amazing.
Looks like.
So I have a personal blog page. I'm an author by profession, and so I have a personal blog page, and I wrote a whole blog about creating this thing, and there's pictures from me.
So how do we find your personal blog page?
Merle Massie.
Just your name.
It's it's a WordPress blog page. You can't miss it.
Okay, that sounds really cool. The again, what's important for you as part of your mental health is having a place of quiet and a place for reflection.
Yeah.
And I guess my shout out too is to we talked about addictions to drug and alcohol. I'd also like to talk about an addiction to social media and doom scrolling, or putting yourself on the Instagram or Facebook fine page. I'm fine. Everybody's life is fine. Well, The Irish have a saying, every front door looks beautiful. You never know what's on the other side till you go through the door.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Are you finding, what would be your encouragement, Merle, to the younger farmers, the mid-30 age farmers, the ones that I always say are exhausted raising children, paying mortgages, and running to all kinds of other off-farm activities and still trying to run a farm business? I really am concerned about this next generation taking on too many things on their plate because they think, well, this is just what we have to do. So tell me about the power of no, not at this time.
It is something that I had to implement in my own life, and it's hard to do. It's really hard to do, especially when you're passionate about something in particular, right? You know, that you want to make sure that whatever it is actually happens in your community. And so one of the two pieces I've learned to say no, and I had to sit down and prioritize. I have people that I am an active caregiver for. And so
Yes.
I had to make some choices in terms of how much energy I had to keep for that work and what I had left over to invest in my community. As long as I invest in myself first, my caregiving role second, and then my community next. So really thinking through the priority. The other thing that helped me, Elaine, is saying not right now, right?
Right,
So
not at this time.
that's right, not right now, not at this time. And so it's recognizing that the ask is valid and that you believe in it. And that what that does is that it allows your brain to shift into who else can I share this great idea with? Who else has capacity to help right now to get things going so that I can jump in later? And that's actually exactly what happened with me and the Do More Agriculture Foundation, because I was following along in 2017 with that original viral treat with Leslie Kelly and her very emotional video that they shared. And I saw the creation, that's right, that she did with Matt. And I saw the creation of the Do More Agriculture Foundation in real time. On the back end, I was actively caregiving for someone who was very, very ill. And there was no way that at the time I could step up to help. I could cheer, but I couldn't be actively involved. What I said to myself then was, not right now.
Right.
And then when the conditions were right and I was able to step up and come and lead Do More, I stuck up my hand and ran towards it.
I think another piece of this conversation too, Merle, is you said prioritizing and deciding self-care comes first.
Yes.
And then your caregiver role. I also call it energy, a return on energy. What gives you energy? And in coaching, we have a term, what are the things that give you energy and what are the things that drain it from you? And when you see someone who is depressed or highly anxious, their energy is really drained because their brain is not rational. Things are not focusing. The systems aren't working well. And I just also would like to know your perspective on how you encourage farmers to go to the doctor.
That's one of the hardest things. Have you seen, I think his name is Dr. Glaucon Floman, something like that. He's on social media and he's got this great skit where a doctor is working in a rural clinic and a farmer walks in and like all hell breaks loose because they know that if a farmer walks in, this person is 95% dead already. So like you'd better move fast. And all the farmers that I share it with, they thought it was funny and very true. You know, I had a family member who got rolled by a cow and had multiple broken ribs and, you know, various contusions and never went to the doctor. Right. So, you know, we know what that looks like. What I say when it comes to that self-care piece is that, you know, investing in yourself is by far the most important thing that you can do. Knowing what fills you up, learning, trying different things. Like you don't always know, right? So try something that seems really, really weird to you and something that you're like, hey, that resonates with me, but I'm going to give it a shot. But try the weird stuff too and just see what sticks, see what helps you. The piece with that though, I see it all the time. People say you can't pour from an empty cup. And what I don't like about that saying is that the purpose of filling your cup is to fill someone else's cup. And I'm like, no. You deserve a full cup. You deserve a full cup. That's it. Full stop. Another piece when it comes, I just want to bring this back to farming.
Right.
One of the things I know when it comes to these discussions is that people tend to think of that self-care piece as being the nice to have, the add-on, right? Whether, they think about yoga and bubble bath and going for a walk or whatever. And they that's the nice to have, but I'm busy. What gets missed is that there's an awful lot of research, and a lot of it comes from the entrepreneur space and the business
Yes.
leadership space, that tells you in no uncertain terms that when a business leader or an entrepreneur is drained, their company, their business suffers. And so
Absolutely.
if there's farmers listening to me, I can tell you this: the more you look after yourself, the better your farm will be. You will be able to see the opportunities, make the pivots, make the changes, be creative, be curious, all of those things. The more you look after yourself, the better your whole world will be.
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to Terry Aberhart and his group who have the Connect. Can't remember the name of the conference. It was in February in Regina a couple of years ago, and they had an entrepreneurial speaker with a book. And Merle, the research showed that the entrepreneurs that were doing the best carved out 30 minutes of quiet time every morning and had thinking time and quiet time before they launched into all the demands
Yeah.
of the day, right?
Yeah. And I'm a writer, and so I know that comes from they'll call it morning pages, sitting
Yes.
down with a journal and just thinking and just allowing your mind to go wherever it needs to go that day and writing it out, so that you might not ever go back and read it again. You don't have to, and you certainly don't have to share it with anyone else. What it does, though, is that writing is actually an analytical process, and it's a connective process. You synthesize all these different thoughts that are going on in your head and cohesively, put it down on paper. And the more often you do that, the more clear your thinking becomes. And the more clear your thinking becomes, the better you can look after things.
And I think that's the power of story as well. So for an 82-year-old farmer who might be listening to this podcast, or the 93-year-old, all of the power of the stories of things that they've seen in the spring of 1957 when there was a flood in Manitoba or whatever. I agree totally. The power of a journal, and a lot of people say, oh, women keep journals. No, that's not true. Because there are also men who've kept amazing journals of everything that happens in the seasons and the cycles of the farm. And how that relates to mental wellness is CBC once did an interview and said the people who actually write in journals, Merle, live longer.
Yeah.
So there's something good for the brain science and the neural connections of what's going on in your head and stabilizing that and not being agitated, but writing it down, getting it from your brain all the way down your arm through the pen or the pencil onto paper, that actually has a bit of a well-being effect. And then my next encouragement following that thought about writing things down is there's a big cliff of resistance and tension and stress and overwhelm in farmers after 60 or particular 65 when their transition plan comes to a grinding halt. And they may have been planning, but I heard this last week and I thought, was very fascinated by the thought, because when you look at it, it's about who am I now? How am I important to this business? I've been doing this for 45, 50 years, and who am I if I can't call myself the main manager anymore? And that's why the language around stepping back without stepping away, I think, is also helpful. And the question for the aging people, male and female on your farm, folks, is, hey, mom, hey, dad, would you mind now start writing things down every month of all of the things from your wisdom that need to be accomplished in January or February or March or April? Just like when we started at the beginning of this conversation, that guy, I think of him every time I drive by his yard. I wonder if the machines got ready on time.
And it's a really good question. I love how you talked about journals. I want to give a shout out to Kylie Stokes in Newfoundland. Okay. And Kylie works with farmer mental health in Newfoundland. She leads that program for the government of Newfoundland and Labrador. And Kylie has created a journal that's specific for agriculture. And we're just taking a look look at it and popping that out. And I'm really hopeful that she'll allow us to offer it to people right across Canada, because I think it's an amazing new resource.
Yeah, and Allison Weaver has one as well.
The Navigate
Yeah.
Journal. I don't have my 2026 one in front of me, but I have my 2025.
Oh, there you go.
Right here. And
It's
yes,
beautiful.
Allison's
Yeah.
Navigate Journal is fantastic as
Right.
well.
So there's a couple of people who've twigged into the fact that writing things down is also a good mental health practice.
Huge.
And remembering what's important and what's truly important. So of all the things that we've talked about today, Merle, and it's fabulous. Just, I'm so glad that you waited and you didn't forget the excitement that you had in 2018 when things were just starting out for Do More Ag, and that you're now in a leadership position as the executive director, because obviously you're doing great things. You're being awarded and recognized for being practical and for having impact in community. Of all the things
I
that
stand
we've
on the
talked
shoulders
about,
of those who've come before and the work that's been done.
right. And it's a team effort, right? And Leslie Kelly, shout out to her too. I've had the privilege of speaking at the same conference as she did. And there's a lot of vulnerability that has gone on for people to share their story in a powerful way so that people know ultimately, folks, you are never alone and you don't have to suffer in silence, and you can be plugged into a support system that will help you be well again and navigate the struggles that you're going through. So of all the things we've talked about, Merle, what would you like the listeners to hang on to the most?
That regular people have absolutely power to make a difference. It's great to get, to take things like mental health first aid or safe talk or peer training or additional training, or to be a therapist or to be a counselor or to run a call line. All of those are absolutely critical and much needed. But the most important thing that you already have, is your ability to listen without judgment, to create space for someone, whether it's yourself or someone in your family or a neighbor, a friend who's struggling. Be with them. Don't pull away, and listen.
Wow. 80% of really good communication apparently is listening. So thank you to all of our listeners who are tuning into this podcast. Now you know there's another great podcast that Merle leads called Hey, Are You Okay? And
Hey, are we okay?
Are we okay? Are we okay? Okay.
Because it's about communities. Yep.
It's about
things
community.
that communities can do. Sorry,
Good.
Elaine.
Well, that's fine. Good to be corrected, and we'll make sure that that's in the show notes. So, folks, please share this far and wide with your friends and your family. And remember, it's your farm and it's your family, and you have lots of choices. So please go out there and make really good choices this spring. Watch out for each other and ask each other, are you okay? How are you doing? And not just how are you when you meet each other at the post office, but how are you doing? That one little word will make the conversation that much richer. We'll hope to see you next time, and have a great season, whatever that looks like to you on your farm and in your family. Bye for now.